She went on a solo trip to Europe, but her male best friend accidentally booked the same flight. I sold her car to pay for my own trip. When she called for bail money, I blocked her number. All right, Reddit. Buckle up because this one's a doozy. My ex-girlfriend thought she could play me like a fiddle while I funded her little European adventure with her best friend. Spoiler alert, I'm not as dumb as she thought I was. Here's how I turned her sneaky vacation into the most expensive mistake of her life. I'm 31, work as a senior estimator for a commercial roofing company here in North Carolina. Basically, I look at blueprints, calculate material costs, labor hours, and tell contractors how much their projects will run them. Been doing it for 7 years now, worked my way up from running numbers on residential jobs to handling commercial contracts worth $500,000. Not the most glamorous job, but it pays well, and I'm good at numbers. Always have been. Math was always my thing in school. The one subject where everything just made sense. Numbers don't lie, don't have hidden agendas, don't tell you one thing while meaning another. Which is probably why I noticed when things weren't adding up with my girlfriend Natalie. We'd been together for almost 3 years when this whole thing went down. Met her at a friend's wedding where she was working as the event coordinator. The wedding was for my college roommate Danny, this big outdoor affair at a vineyard outside Charlotte. I remember standing near the gift table, trying not to look like I had nobody to talk to, when I noticed this woman with a clipboard, directing caterers like she was conducting an orchestra. Natalie had this whole put-together vibe going on. Earpiece in, walkie-talkie clipped to her belt, striding across the grass in heels like she was born doing. Every time something went wrong, and plenty did, she handled it without breaking a sweat. The florist delivered the wrong color roses, she fixed it. The best man lost his speech, she had a backup plan. The DJ was running late, she'd already arranged a playlist to fill the gap. I thought it was attractive. Someone who had their life organized, who could handle chaos and come out on top. Little did I know that organizational skill would later be used to coordinate elaborate lies. I introduced myself during the cocktail hour. We talked for maybe 15 minutes before she had to run off and deal with another crisis, but she gave me her number before she left. Our first date was coffee, which turned into lunch, which turned into walking around downtown Charlotte until the sun went down. She was smart, funny, had this quick wit that kept me on my toes. Natalie was 29, worked for an event planning company downtown, and had this way of making everything sound reasonable. Like, she could convince you that the sky was green if she said it with enough confidence. She'd do this thing where she'd tilt her head slightly, look you right in the eyes, and explain whatever she wanted in this calm, logical voice that made you feel like disagreeing would be stupid. That skill should have been my first red flag, but love makes you stupid. Or at least it made me stupid for a while. The first year of our relationship was great. Like, actually great. Not just good on paper great. We went on weekend trips to the mountains, tried new restaurants, spent lazy Sundays watching bad movies and making fun of them together. She remembered the little things about me, stuff I mentioned once in passing, my favorite candy, the name of my childhood dog, the fact that I always wanted to learn to play guitar, but never got around to it. She bought me a guitar for my birthday and signed us up for lessons together. I thought she was the one. Her friends all told her she was lucky to have found a guy like me, stable, reliable, good job, actually listened when she talked. Her sister pulled me aside at a family dinner once and said, "Don't mess this up, she's never been this happy." I had no intention of messing it up. I was all in. We moved in together after 18 months of dating. Got a nice 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of town with a balcony where I could grill. Split the rent 50-50, which seemed fair since we made roughly the same money. I started thinking about the future, saved up for a ring. I was playing the long game, building something real. Meanwhile, she was apparently thinking about something else entirely. Enter Brandon. Brandon was Natalie's best friend from college. They'd known each other for like 10 years, had all these inside jokes I didn't understand, and texted constantly. I first met him about 3 months into our relationship, at a birthday party for one of Natalie's co-workers. He walked in wearing these tight jeans and a button-down shirt with too many buttons undone, carrying a bottle of wine like he was presenting an award. Now, I'm not a jealous dude. Never have been. I've got female friends from work, from my gym, from the softball league I play in. I understand that men and women can be platonic, that adults can maintain healthy friendships with the opposite gender without it turning into something more. But something about Brandon always rubbed me wrong. Maybe it was the way he'd look at her when he thought nobody was watching. This lingering gaze that lasted a half second too long, like he was memorizing her face. Maybe it was how she'd light up whenever he came around, laughing a little too hard at his mediocre jokes, touching his arm when she talked. Or maybe it was the fact that this dude was 32 years old, supposedly straight, Never had a serious girlfriend in the entire time I knew him, but somehow had time to text my girlfriend at 11 o'clock at night about work stuff. Brandon worked as a freelance photographer, the artsy type who wore scarves indoors and had strong opinions about coffee beans. He was always traveling somewhere for shoots, which apparently meant taking pictures of barns and empty playgrounds, then calling it art. Dude had an Instagram full of moody black and white photos and captions that sounded like fortune cookies. Real deep stuff like light finds those who seek shadow under a picture of a puddle. I thought it was pretentious garbage. Every time I brought up my concerns about their friendship, Natalie would hit me with the classic lines. You're being insecure. He's like a brother to me. I can't believe you don't trust me. And then she'd get this hurt look on her face, like I'd wounded her deeply by even asking, and I'd feel like the bad guy, like I was the one with the problem, the one who needed to work on himself. So I'd apologize, tell her I trusted her, and stuff down that nagging feeling in my gut that said something wasn't right. Looking back, that's textbook manipulation. Making the person who has legitimate concerns feel crazy for having them, turning every valid question into an attack on her character. But hindsight's 20/20, and when you're in it, you don't see the patterns. Things started getting weird around February of last year. Natalie became obsessed with this idea of a solo trip to Europe. Said she needed to find herself and have experiences before turning 30. She'd pull up travel blogs at dinner, show me pictures of the Eiffel Tower and the canals of Amsterdam, talk about how she'd always dreamed of seeing these places in person. Now, I'm all for personal growth. Travel is great. I'd been to Mexico a few times, did a road trip across the Southwest after college, always wanted to see more of the world. But the timing felt off. She'd been distant for weeks before she brought up the trip, coming home late from work events that weren't on her calendar, going to the gym at weird hours, like 9 o'clock at night on a Tuesday, guarding her phone like it contained nuclear codes, angling it away from me when she texted, taking it into the bathroom even when she was just brushing her teeth. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give these vague non-answers that told me nothing. Fine. Busy. The usual. No details, no stories, no nothing. Meanwhile, she's researching flights to Paris and Amsterdam like her life depended on it. She'd made spreadsheets, color-coded itineraries, lists of restaurants and museums and photo spots. For someone who claimed this was a spontaneous desire for self-discovery, she sure had a lot of specific plans. I offered to go with her. Seemed like a no-brainer, right? That she'd never done anything completely by herself, and this was important for her growth as a person. Okay, fine. I respected that. Told her I'd miss her, but I understood. I wasn't going to be that boyfriend, the controlling type who couldn't handle his girlfriend taking a trip without him. I wanted her to be happy, to have experiences, to grow. What kind of partner would I be if I stood in the way of that? Then she dropped the bomb about funding. See, Natalie had a car, a 2019 Honda Accord that her parents had helped her buy after her old Toyota finally gave up the ghost. Nice car, reliable, silver with leather seats, nothing special, but it got the job done. About a year into our relationship, she'd convinced me to co-sign on a refinancing deal when she wanted lower monthly payments. At the time, it seemed reasonable. Her credit wasn't great, some mistakes in her early 20s. She needed someone with better credit to help her get a decent rate. I had a credit score of 780. Easy decision, right? She was my girlfriend. We were building a life together. What's the worst that could happen? Famous last words. Turns out when you co-sign on something, you're just as responsible for it as the primary borrower. If they miss a payment, it hits your credit. If they default, you're on the hook. At the time, I trusted Natalie completely. And when that primary borrower decides she wants to blow $3,000 on a European vacation, but doesn't quite have the cash, guess what she suggests? She wanted me to cover her half of the rent for 2 months while she was gone, so she could put that money toward her trip. We're talking about $1,600. Plus, she casually mentioned that her credit card was maxed out from booking flights and hotels, so maybe I could help with some of the upfront costs, and she'd pay me back when she got home. I'll pay you back as soon as I get my tax refund, she said, with that confident smile that usually worked on me. And think about it. You'll have the whole apartment to yourself for 2 weeks. It'll be like a staycation. Now, I'm not cheap. I've helped girlfriends out before when times were tough. When Natalie's car needed an unexpected repair 6 months into our relationship, I covered half of it without being asked. When her mom had surgery and she wanted to fly home but couldn't afford the ticket, I bought it for her. That's what partners do, right? You help each other out. But something about this felt different. Maybe it was the way she asked, like she expected me to just agree without question. Maybe it was the running total in my head of all the times she'd borrowed money and never quite gotten around to paying it back. Little things that added up to probably $2,000 over the year. $2,000 that she always intended to pay back when things settled down, but somehow never did. I told her I needed to think about it. She didn't like that answer. Her face did this thing where the smile stayed frozen, but her eyes went cold. Think about it? What's there to think about? I'm your girlfriend. I'm asking for help. It's a lot of money, Nat. And you already owe me for... Oh, so you're keeping score now? That's really nice, Jake. Really makes a girl feel loved. And just like that, the conversation was over. She went to bed without saying goodnight, and for the next few weeks, she was cold. Snippy comments about everything, sleeping on the far edge of the bed, conveniently forgetting to make dinner on the nights it was her turn. Classic passive-aggressive warfare designed to wear me down until I caved. But here's the thing. While she was playing mind games, I was paying attention. One night in early March, I woke up around 2 in the morning to use the bathroom. Her phone was charging on the nightstand, and as I walked past, it lit up with a notification. I almost kept walking. Almost. But something made me stop. That nagging feeling in my gut that I'd been ignoring for months. I'm not proud of what I did next, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Her passcode was her birthday. Because of course it was. What I found in those messages made my stomach drop. Pages and pages of text between her and Brandon, going back months. The early messages were flirty, but could have been explained away. Then it escalated. Pet names. Babe. Sweetheart. Talk about how they couldn't wait to be together. How sneaking around was exhausting. Screenshots of trip planning. Flight confirmations showing their seats. 14A and 14B. Right next to each other on a plane to Paris. But the real kicker? Hotel reservation. Not adjacent rooms. The same rooms. One room in Paris. One room in Amsterdam. One room in Barcelona. For 2 weeks across 3 cities, they'd be sharing a bed while I sat at home thinking my girlfriend was finding herself. There were messages about how they'd have to be careful, posting on social media so I wouldn't find out. How she'd tell me it was a solo trip, and they'd accidentally run into each other there. How romantic it would be to finally be together for real, without having to hide. How Brandon was so much more adventurous and alive than I was. How he made her feel things she hadn't felt in years. That one stung. I won't pretend it didn't. She'd been planning this for months. While I was thinking about engagement rings and our future, she was coordinating a romantic getaway with her best friend. Using the money I'd be giving her to fund a trip with the guy she was cheating on me with. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, running through my options. The old me would have confronted her immediately, but I'm 31 years old. I've been through enough to know that the best revenge isn't served hot. It's served cold, calculated, and devastating. So I made a plan. First things first, I needed evidence. I forwarded the most damning screenshots to my own phone and deleted the sent messages from her outbox. She'd never know I'd seen them. Then I started documenting everything. Every lie about the trip being solo. Every mention of Brandon like he was just some random friend. Every financial contribution I'd made to her life. Next, I looked into our financial situation. The apartment lease was in both our names, but I'd been the primary applicant with the better credit score. They'd only approved us because of me. Her car, however, was a different story. Remember that refinancing deal I co-signed? I dug out the paperwork from my filing cabinet and read through every page. Turns out that co-signing made me equally liable for the vehicle. My name was right there next to hers, legally binding. And according to the loan document, I had certain rights regarding the collateral. See, when Natalie refinanced, she'd taken out more than what the car was worth at the time, planning to use the extra cash for home improvements that never happened. That meant she was upside down on the loan from day one. She owed about 14 grand on a car worth maybe 11. Not my problem under normal circumstances, except that my name was on that loan too. If she defaulted, my credit would tank right alongside hers. I called a buddy named Steve who works at a car dealership over in Greensboro. Known each other since high school, played on the same baseball team, stayed in touch over the years. Good guy, knows the auto industry inside and out. I explained the situation without going into too much detail, just said I was in a complicated spot with my girlfriend and a car loan and needed to know my options. He told me that as a co-signer, I had more leverage than I realized. If I could prove I was making payments, which I had documentation for, I might be able to claim a stake in the vehicle. Better yet, if she defaulted, I'd be on the hook anyway, so the lender would likely work with me to find a solution. Banks don't like chasing 2 people for the same debt. They prefer clean resolution. Then I did something that probably saved me from making a huge mistake. I talked to a lawyer, found a guy named Patterson through a co-worker's recommendation. Cost me $200 for an hour, but it was worth every penny. He walked me through my options, told me what was legal and what would get me in trouble, and most importantly, reminded me not to do anything stupid that would land me in court on the wrong side. Patterson told me a few things. First, since we weren't married, our finances were mostly separate. North Carolina isn't a common law marriage state, So living together for 3 years didn't give either of us any special claims on the other's property. The apartment could be handled by giving proper notice and breaking the lease, which would cost us both a penalty, but nothing catastrophic. Second, the car situation was trickier, but since I'd been making payments and was a co-signer, I had option. If I could show that she was at risk of defaulting, or if she'd already missed payments that I'd covered, I could potentially force a sale or refinancing to get my name off the loan and protect my credit. Third, and most importantly, Patterson reminded me not to do anything stupid that would land me in legal trouble. No destroying her property, no blackmail, no posting those screenshots publicly in a way that could be considered defamation. Play it smart, keep it legal, protect myself. That last part was key, because my initial instinct was nuclear. I wanted to print out those messages and tape them to the walls of our apartment, send them to her parents, post them on Facebook with a detailed timeline of her betrayal, burn it all down and watch her life crumble. But smart beats angry every time. Patterson made that clear. Natalie's trip was scheduled for April 15th, returning May 1st. That gave me about 6 weeks to get everything in order. She had no idea I knew anything. As far as she was concerned, I was just her reliable, slightly boring boyfriend who was probably going to cave and give her the money she wanted any day now. I played along perfectly. About a week after I found the messages, I told her I'd been thinking about her trip, said I felt bad for being hesitant, that I'd been stressed about work and took it out on her. I'd cover the rent while she was gone. Her face lit up like she'd won the lottery, all smiles and gratitude, wrapping her arms around me and telling me I was the best boyfriend ever. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. I even gave her $500 in cash as a spending money gift, telling her I wanted her to have fun and buy herself something nice in Paris. She actually teared up a little, said she didn't deserve me. For once, we agreed on something. What she didn't know was that I'd already found a new apartment. A nice one-bedroom in a complex closer to my job, cheaper rent, updated appliances, no roommate required. I'd toured it 3 weeks earlier, put down the deposit in cash, and signed the lease to start May 1st, the exact day she was supposed to return from her solo adventure. I'd also started quietly moving my stuff out. Just small things at first, items she wouldn't notice. My grandmother's china, which I'd inherited when she passed, and had been keeping in the back of the cabinet. Important documents like my birth certificate, passport, and financial records. Childhood photo albums that were irreplaceable. The good kitchen equipment that I'd bought. The KitchenAid mixer and the cast iron skillets that my dad had given me. Slowly, box by box, my car would make trips to a storage unit I'd rented on the other side of town. I also had a conversation with our landlord, a guy named Mr. Patterson, no relation to the lawyer. Explained that I'd be moving out at the end of April and that my girlfriend would need to either take over the lease solo or find somewhere else to live. He wasn't thrilled, said he'd have to run her credit, and she probably wouldn't qualify on her own. But I gave him 60 days notice in writing, which was more than required. Whatever happened after that was between him and Natalie. But the car, that was my masterpiece. Remember those missed payments I mentioned? Over the course of 2 years, Natalie had forgotten to pay the car note 5 times. Each time I'd covered it when I found out, usually because she'd casually mentioned something about money being tight, or I'd notice a late fee on a statement lying around. I'd transfer the money to her account, she'd thank me profusely, and we'd move on. Never got paid back. Never even got a serious promise to pay me back. I had documentation for all of it. Bank statements showing the transfers from my account to hers on dates that lined up with the payment due dates. Texts where she'd thanked me for covering it. The receipts were all there. 2 weeks before her trip, I went to the dealership Steve worked at. We'd worked out a deal over several conversations. I wasn't going to steal the car or do anything dramatic. I was going to exercise my legal rights as a co-borrower. I called the bank that held the loan, explained that as a co-signer, I was concerned about my liability given the borrower's history of missed payments, provided documentation of the payments I'd covered, asked about my options for either removing myself from the loan or forcing a sale to protect my credit. The loan officer was surprisingly helpful. She told me that since Natalie had missed multiple payments that I'd had to cover, I had grounds to request a collateral review. They could either refinance the loan in her name only, which would require her to qualify on her own credit, or we could voluntarily surrender the vehicle and they'd auction it to cover the remaining balance. Any deficit would be split between us as co-borrowers. Any surplus would also be split. I went with option 2, filed the paperwork for a voluntary surrender, citing my documented financial exposure and the borrower's payment history. The bank scheduled a pickup for the night of April 14th, the day before Natalie's flight. Here's the thing about voluntary surrenders. They're not ideal for your credit, but they're better than a repossession. And since I'd been making payments reliably and was the one initiating the process to protect my score, The bank noted my account accordingly. Natalie's credit, on the other hand, was going to take a serious hit. The car got picked up at 3 a.m. while we were both asleep. I heard the tow truck but pretended to sleep through it. When Natalie woke up the next morning and looked out the window at the empty parking spot, I watched her face go from confused to panicked to furious in about 30 seconds. "Jake, my car is gone!" I came out of the bathroom acting groggy. "What? Someone stole it!" I walked over to the window, looked down at the empty spot. Huh, that's weird. She was already calling the police when the bank called her. I watched her face as they explained what happened. A voluntary surrender. Her co-borrower had initiated it. The vehicle had been retrieved and would be auctioned to cover the outstanding loan balance. She hung up and stared at me with this look I'll never forget. "You did this. I protected my credit from your missed payments." I grabbed my coffee from the counter. "Should have been more responsible, Nat. You had no right." Actually, I had every legal right as a co-borrower. Talked to a lawyer and everything. I took a sip. "Anyway, you should probably figure out how you're getting to the airport. Your flight's in a few hours, right?" The next 20 minutes were chaos. Yelling, crying, threats to sue me, call the cops, tell everyone what a monster I was. I just sat on the couch, sipping my coffee, letting her burn herself out. There's something almost peaceful about watching someone realize they've lost all their leverage. All those manipulation tactics that used to work on me, useless now. I'd already made my moves. The game was over, and she'd lost before she even knew we were playing. Finally, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "How am I supposed to get to the airport?" "Uber exists." I pulled out my phone. "Actually, I'll order you one. Consider it my goodbye gift." While we waited for her ride, I dropped the other shoe. "Oh, and I'm moving out. Already signed a new lease. Gave the landlord notice. You've got until the end of May to figure out your living situation. That's about 6 weeks. Should be plenty of time to find a roommate or something." "What? You can't just—" "I can." And I did. I met her eyes for the first time that morning. "By the way, Nat, have fun in Paris with Brandon. Seats 14A and 14B, right? Real coincidence that you both accidentally booked the same flight. And those hotel rooms you're sharing? Real nice." The look on her face when she realized I knew everything. Color draining away. Mouth opening and closing with no words coming out. The desperate scramble behind her eyes as she tried to figure out how to spin this. How to talk her way out of it like she always did. She couldn't. Her Uber pulled up. She grabbed her suitcase and left without another word. Probably figured she'd deal with me when she got back. She had a flight to catch after all. A romantic vacation to take. Brandon was waiting. The car auction generated about $9,000. After paying off the remaining loan balance and covering the fees, I walked away with roughly $4,000. Not enough to cover everything I'd lost to her over 3 years, but enough to fund a trip of my own. That night, I booked a flight to Costa Rica. 10 days at a surf resort on the Pacific coast, leaving the day after her plane took off. Never been surfing before in my life, but something about riding waves sounded like exactly what I needed. New place, new experience, new me. The first few days, Natalie blew up my phone. Texts, calls, voicemails. At first it was angry. How dare I sell the car? How could I do this to her? I was going to regret this. I was psycho, controlling, abusive. The same manipulation tactics she always used, just turned up to 11. Then it shifted to pleading. She was sorry. She could explain everything. Brandon was just a friend, she swore. I must have misunderstood. The flights being the same was a coincidence. The hotels were just because he'd recommended them. It wasn't what it looked like. "Please, Jake, just talk to me. We can work this out." I didn't respond to any of it. Just let the messages pile up while I learned to paddle out past the break and wipe out spectacularly on waves that were way above my skill level. The instructors were patient, mostly local guys who'd been riding waves since they could walk. They taught me how to read the water, when to paddle, how to pop up without falling. By day 4, I was actually standing up for a few seconds at a time before eating salt water. By day 7, I could ride small waves all the way to the beach. Best week I'd had in years. On day 6 of my trip, which would have been day 5 of hers, I got a different kind of message. Not from Natalie. From a number I didn't recognize with a 919 area code Raleigh. It was her mom, Denise. Now, I'd always liked Natalie's parents. Good people. Salt of the earth types who'd raised their daughter better than she turned out. Her dad, Frank, was an electrician, winding down toward retirement, doing part-time consulting work these days. Her mom, Denise, made the best sweet potato casserole I'd ever tasted. Always sent me home with containers of leftovers after Sunday dinners. They'd welcome me into their family, talked about grandkids someday, looked genuinely sad when I stopped coming around after everything fell apart. Part of me felt bad for them. They didn't ask for any of this, but that wasn't going to change what I was about to do. I almost didn't listen to the voicemail, almost deleted it without hearing a word, but curiosity got the better of me. Natalie had been arrested. I sat up so fast I nearly knocked my breakfast into the sand. Played the message again to make sure I'd heard it right. Yep, arrested. In Amsterdam. Now, I'm not going to pretend I saw this coming. I'm not some mastermind who planned every detail of her downfall. But apparently karma is real, and it's got a twisted sense of humor. Here's what I pieced together from Denise's frantic voicemail, some creative social media stalking, and a conversation with Danny, my old roommate, who was still loosely connected to Natalie's friend group. Natalie and Brandon had been having a grand old time in Europe. Paris had gone smoothly, from what I could tell. Plenty of Instagram posts of croissants and the Eiffel Tower, all carefully framed to suggest she was alone, even though we both knew better. Amsterdam was next on their itinerary. Now, Amsterdam is famous for a lot of things. The canals, the Van Gogh Museum, Anne Frank's house, and certain establishments where things that are illegal in most of the world are perfectly legal to consume on site. Brandon, being the free-spirited artistic type, had indulged enthusiastically, but he'd also gotten greedy. Instead of just enjoying the local customs while in town, he'd decided to bring some souvenirs home. Not the kind you buy at a gift shop, the kind that gets you in serious trouble when you cross international borders. At the airport, heading to their next stop in Barcelona, security flagged Natalie's suitcase. Random check, they said. Turns out Brandon had convinced her to carry his stash because they check guys more thoroughly than girls. Real class act, that one. So there's Natalie, standing in Schiphol Airport with substances that are very much not legal for export, trying to explain to Dutch authorities that they weren't hers, that her friend had put them there, that she didn't know anything about it. Brandon, of course, was nowhere to be found. He'd conveniently gone through a different security line, and when he saw her getting pulled aside, he kept walking, right through the gate, right onto his connecting flight to Spain. Didn't look back, didn't try to help, didn't say a word to anyone. Just left her there. Let that sink in. The guy she left me for, the guy she'd been planning this whole romantic adventure with, the man who made her feel alive, abandoned her at the first sign of trouble. Literally left her holding the bag. Dutch authorities are actually pretty reasonable compared to some countries. This wasn't Singapore where you might disappear into a prison forever. But Natalie was still looking at serious legal consequences. Major fines, possible jail time, definitely a criminal record. She needed a lawyer. A good one who spoke English and understood Dutch law. Those don't come cheap anywhere. And in a foreign country during a legal emergency, they cost even more. That's when her mom started calling me. The voicemail was something else. Lots of crying. Lots of, I know she made mistakes, but she's still my daughter. Denise explained the situation as best she understood it, said the lawyer wanted a €10,000 retainer just to start, and they didn't have that kind of money liquid. Frank's retirement savings were tied up. They couldn't access them quickly enough. And then the ask, could I help? Wire some money for legal fees? Please, Jake. You're the only one with the savings to help quickly. We'd pay you back double. I sat on the beach, watched a pelican dive for fish, and thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Then I called Denise back, told her I was sorry about Natalie's situation, but we'd broken up before she left. I'd moved out. We had no financial ties anymore. This wasn't my problem to solve. She tried to argue, tried to guilt me, said Natalie still loved me, that Brandon was just a mistake. I let her finish, then said goodbye. Then I blocked Natalie's number. Her mom's too. Brandon's, just for good measure. The rest of my trip was the most peaceful week I'd had in 3 years. Learned to actually surf. Made friends with some guys from Colorado chasing waves around Central America. Came home tanned and 10 pounds lighter. Here's what happened to everyone else. Natalie's parents took out a second mortgage on their house to pay for her lawyer. Let that sink in. Good people who'd worked their whole lives, who were supposed to be enjoying retirement, had to leverage their home because their daughter's boyfriend abandoned her with his stash in a foreign country. Frank had to delay retiring from his part-time consulting work. Denise started picking up extra shifts at the church thrift store she volunteered at. The legal process took 3 weeks. She had to stay in the Netherlands the whole time, stuck in a budget hotel near the airport while her case got processed. Credit cards maxed out. Parents wiring money for food and lodging. Meanwhile, Brandon posted artsy photos from Rome and Barcelona. One caption said, "Solo adventures are the best adventures." Posted it 3 days after he'd abandoned her to deal with Dutch police alone. She got off with a fine and a suspended sentence, but picked up a criminal record that'll follow her forever. Has to disclose it on job application. Gets flagged at every customs checkpoint. Can't visit half a dozen countries that don't let people in with that kind of record. Brandon ghosted her the second she got back to the States. Blocked her on everything. Turned out he'd started dating some yoga instructor in Barcelona during what was supposed to be their romantic trip together. Moved on like Natalie never existed. She came back to North Carolina broke, with a criminal record, no car, no apartment, and no boyfriend. Moved back in with her parents at 29. The same parents who just mortgaged their retirement to bail her out. 6 months later, I got promoted to department manager. Own office with a window, nice raise. Started building real savings again. Bought a new truck, nothing fancy but mine. Started thinking about buying a house. 8 months after that, I met Michelle. She's 28, works as a veterinary technician. We met when her neighbor's dog got loose, and I helped catch it in the parking lot. She came down to thank me, we got to talking, went for coffee that weekend. Been together almost a year now. But here's the best part. 4 months ago, I got a LinkedIn notification. Someone viewed my profile. Natalie. Checked her page. Job status said, seeking opportunities. Turns out the event planning company fired her. Hard to plan destination weddings when you can't pass a background check or travel internationally. A week later, Doug from one of our contractor companies called me. Said they had a candidate who'd listed me as a personal reference. 3 guesses who. She'd applied for an entry-level office admin position. Significant pay cut from what she used to make. And she'd put my name down as a reference without asking. Doug asked what I could tell him about her work ethic, reliability, and character. I told him the truth. We dated, it ended badly due to her choices, and she has a criminal record from an incident in the Netherlands. Just facts. Let him draw his own conclusion. She didn't get the job. Last week, I ran into her mom at the grocery store. Denise looked older, tired. She told me Natalie was working at a call center now, still living at home, still paying off the legal fees. Her credit was destroyed. She'd had to sell most of her nice things just to cover the fines. Brandon had apparently gotten married to the yoga instructor, posted the wedding photos last month. Natalie saw them. Denise asked if I'd ever consider giving Natalie another chance. Said she'd changed, she'd grown up, she understood what she'd lost. I told her I was engaged to Michelle. Proposed 2 weeks ago at the beach, where we'd taken our first weekend trip together. She said yes before I finished asking. Denise's face did this complicated thing, somewhere between sad and accepting. She congratulated me, said she was happy I'd found someone good, and walked away with her shopping cart. I went home, grilled some steaks with my fiancé, told her about running into Denise. Michelle just shook her head and said some people never learn. Then she showed me the venue she'd found for the wedding. Small place, nothing fancy, exactly what we wanted. Didn't think about Natalie again. So that's my story, Reddit. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.